So we'll just start with Spring Boot. Before Spring Boot, you can see the differences between them. Okay, uh, what is Spring and now as we are shifting to Spring Boot. And one more thing for Spring MVC, I'll give an example end to end. One more example later, including the security everything after boot discussions. Okay, exception handling because most of the concepts are same as once we go through the advisors and all in Spring Boot, right? I'll come back and give you one more example. Okay. Yeah. Yes. No. At the rate being object also it will create. I think you missed that session. Okay. See that video at the rate configuration with the at the rate being. I stressed that concept and explained two, three times. That is very important. Okay. Go through that session. Yeah. So yeah, coming to these discussions, right, before going to Spring Boot, see the just plain differences. Spring Boot, it's an open source anyway, these are also open source. Spring Boot, Spring Framework earlier we used to use for all the enterprise level applications, okay. Monolithic basically, in other words, for monolithic applications we used to use them. In my experience, I worked for Citibank. There, that application is almost 50 years before developed when Spring started. Still, that is continuing in Spring framework. Huge code we have in a single application itself. Okay, so not only that, all the older applications which are implemented, in 2000s, in that era, they all used Spring for building their enterprise applications by integrating with all other different software set. Like if they want to integrate with Kafka or any messaging queues or any databases or any downstream systems. Spring will provide integration support also. It is easy, right? As we learned so far, easily we can create integrations from the configuration class and we can integrate them. So integration is easy. So all enterprise applications are designed in such a way. But Spring Boot, right, is so much flexible for REST-based applications. That too, right nowadays we are implementing applications in microservices architecture. So to implement that microservices REST APIs, right, it is simple to use actually. Just we need to set up a project and we need to write a controller there. That's it. No other settings or containers you need to write or configurations, XML files. All that they avoided here. They made it simple. Rapid application development we can do here uh, just by doing small configurations. That's it. And this is mostly useful for REST-based applications. Still, if you want to create standalone applications, nobody stops. You can use it for standalone also. Still, Spring Boot, if you want to use for enterprise development, still you can use. Okay. But widely we are using this for REST. Okay. So the main important feature that we have gone through is dependency injection and automatic object creation, right? Dependency injection and automatically it used to create objects using component scan, right? That is the high level feature that we observed so far, right? Using component scan automatically, it used to create controller objects, service objects, DAO objects, right? For your component scan. When you go to Spring Boot, apart from that, auto configuration support also they given. Apart from this, right, automatic configurations they given. Auto configurations, automatic, configurations itself, default configurations they given. Let's say if you are developing a web application, so by default a port number given to you, By default, the Spring Dispatcher Servlet configuration given to you. By default, embedded Tomcat given to you. Okay, so that default auto configuration support, and by default they provide DAO implementations. If you provide just repositories, automatic DAO implementations also they will provide. You need not to implement them. So via configurations, Spring Boot will start work. It will add so many features to us. So here it helps to create loosely coupled applications. Of course, Spring Boot also will follow the same. And of course, here also the same thing, loosely coupled applications, not only standalone. Spring Boot application, we configure and run them explicitly. Okay, so we create MVC application and finally we convert it into var and we deploy it into Tomcat. Or else we will run it on Tomcat explicitly. We configure, download a Tomcat into our Eclipse and we run them. In Spring Boot, the boot itself came up with embedded Tomcat. So you need not to, you can use Tomcat or Jetty. There are many flavors we have. Okay, we can use any embedded server for our Spring Boot application. You need not to configure them explicitly. You need not to download and configure them. Okay, so here deployment descriptor is required. That means your configuration file, XML file is required. Via XML file, we configure them. At least component scan and annotations activation we do, right? At the rate MVC annotation driven and the components can be put. So that is all not required here. There is no requirement of deployment descriptor. No, your Spring XML file. Of course, web.xml file also you can consider. But here, yeah, you need not to deal with them. Whatever XML files you have, right? Both web.xml or Spring XML. Because here only you are doing all your configurations, right? No configurations required. No web.xml, no Spring XML. Without a descriptor, deployment descriptors also it will function. Okay, so this much headache we don't have here. You need not to configure them. Default this web.xml file, right? They provide in the default MVC jar file. The default configurations they given in web.jar file. In that web.jar file by default given all these configurations, dispatcher servlet configurations, everything. So you need not to configure it. And no Spring XML file, no Spring XML file that we configure via at the rate Spring Boot application. As soon as you use Spring Boot application, it will it will give all that capabilities to your app. It is completely different. Okay, it is completely different. They made things simple without the XML file. We just use this annotation on top of our class. This annotation will drive the remaining story. Okay, and Spring Boot in Spring applications developers write lots of code. You need to write really lot of code there, like DO classes particularly. You need to write lot of code. Coming to DO itself, lot of database code you need to write. CRUD operations, save, update, delete, select. You know that is very a little bit complicated, right? Apart from the controller and business logic, database logic used to be always complicated because a lot of queries you need to write there. When it comes to Spring Boot, we never uh, I mean we can customize it, but for plain CRUD operations you need not to write even single line of code. So lot of code burden will be reduced in Spring Boot. Okay, so in-memory database support we don't have, whereas in Spring Boot by default it will provide H2 database support. Okay, in case if you want to do something, a quick example, and if you want to test it, you can do it in H2. Later you can plug in with your actual database and execute your actual DB operations. So time being, if you want to use any memory database, the default it came up with H2, you can use that. So developers need to write a lot of code. So here, yeah, here they reduce a lot of code. Okay, developers have to define dependencies manually in form.xml file. This is great advantage if you see the line number 10, right? So while doing Spring-based applications, you need to find all your Spring jar files, and along with Spring, if you are going to use Hibernate or any other dependencies, right? You should find out the right compatible jar files and you should add them into your form file, or you need to download them and you should add them into your class path. Whereas in Spring Boot came up with a concept like Spring Boot, parent configuration version. Under that parent version, all the supported child libraries will be available. Just if you pick a parent version, that parent version required, the remaining libraries, it will fetch automatically. Okay. So finding dependency is also simple here. You need not to bother about your dependencies. Even you need not to look into your form file for the dependencies. They given tools support here. Okay. If I add one more column here, no project setup tool apart from Eclipse. Here we have STS for project setup, right? For project setup, initial project setup is very difficult, right? You need to set up the project, you need to download all the jar files, and, Spring XML file you need to create, web.xml file you need to do, and all the form dependencies you need to add. No project setup tool apart from the Eclipse. Here for project setup, you can use Spring Initializer and STS also. Spring Toolsuite. Via Spring Toolsuite easily you can set up, and via Spring Initializer also you can do that setup. So by default it will generate a form file. That form file you can use. Yes, it's okay. Okay, we'll see here. You need not to even set up that. What I'm saying is, you need not to do that setup. Once after this project setup, I'll show you. Okay, how the dependencies are managed. Dependencies easily managed. In other words, you can say dependency management is simple. Dependencies management is difficult, easy to manage dependencies. Easy to manage your dependencies here. Okay. Yeah. So let me start with the basic Hello World application, and from there you can see how simple Spring Boot application is. Let me save it. Okay. So I said there are two ways to create the application. There are two ways to create the application. Okay. One is using Spring Initializer, that is legal approach, and one is using STS. Both are legal only. So you can see here Spring Initializer. What is this? Spring Initializer. Yeah. So this is the Spring Initializer web tool. You can use this to set up your project. or the same kind of setup available from STS also. You can use STS also, Spring Toolsuit. So in initializer or in STS, all right, in both the ways you can do the project setup. So if you see the initializer, right, this is the URL that you can use, start.io, spring start.io. Here you can create. Okay. So your project type you should choose here. Is it a Gradle or Maven project? So you need to choose Maven, build a tool. So as soon as you choose build a tool, so here which programming language you want to use. Java we do, and Spring Boot available versions it is showing current versions. Okay, so you can choose the snapshot version is currently going on. So any complete version if you want to choose a concrete version you can choose them here. Okay, so choose any latest version also. If I choose the old one 2.7.16, you can choose and put your required package name. You can mention here com.rbu and your application name. Okay, something hello world. 3.2.0. I'm not sure. I should see. It's 3.2 point. Okay. So in 2023, 9 M3 available. On behalf of the team and everyone has contributed, I'm happy to announce that has been released now available here. This release includes 97 enhancements. Okay. So every version name, yeah, as I said, maybe their milestone. M3 stands for maybe MMM. Yeah. So you can follow the Spring IO for the documentation. Okay, the complete VMware is updating it. Okay, they already providing Spring, right, Spring Boot. So you can see the community and any examples, the projects. If you have any Spring Batch, Spring Security, Data Cloud, anything, right, you can go here. For Spring tools also you can go here. For development tools there are two tools available, right, as I said, STS and Initializer. Blogs are available, many things are available here. You can go through it. Spring IO. Yeah. So here as soon as you choose them, it will ask you to finally do you want to make it as a jar file or a war file. If it is a jar, it's a standalone application. If it is a war, it should be your web application. Okay, so even web applications also we can run using jar. Okay, web applications as a jar also we can run. The final packaging structure it is asking here, with the jar or where you want to package it and which Java version you want to use. So choose the required Java version and the dependencies, right? As I was talking about dependencies. So you need not to bother about versions and all. So which all dependencies you need for your project. Let's say you want to make web application, you can add web dependency, Spring Web. If you want to use um, Hibernate ORM for your application, so you can use JPA, Spring Data JPA. If you want to use Kafka to your application, Spring Kafka dependency. If you want to use cloud configuration, cloud configuration. Lombok, if you want to use, add Lombok dependency. SQL, MySQL, you want to connect with your application with MySQL, MySQL driver you can add. Almost all the basic needed libraries are available here. You can choose them. Directly you can choose them and you can add it here. So I'm just removing them. Just adding WebJar file. Web dependencies. So as soon as I add this web dependencies, you can see build web, including RESTful applications using MVC. Both you can do here. REST you can do, MVC you can do, and uses Apache Tomcat as a default container. Default Apache Tomcat embedded container it will use. So what all it is providing also in the description you can see, and you can generate a project. So you will get one download here. Just extract it and import. So while importing, right, you choose existing Maven project. So if it is a Gradle, you need to import existing Gradle project. While choosing here, if you choose Gradle, Gradle for Groovy Kotlin, Java support also, right? Okay. Yeah. So you can import Maven project. I haven't tried with the Gradle. Okay. So if I try, I'll show you. Or else I need to try and show it to you. Okay. Yeah. Usually Gradle also working with STS. You can easily import and try it by creating Gradle. And Gradle to Maven or Maven to Gradle also easily you can convert in this tool. Automatically it will convert Maven to Gradle, Gradle to Maven project also. Okay, it is saying already hello world is there. Let me rename it. Hello world one. So just import as a Maven project. So all the Maven dependencies is downloads if not available in local, and it will build it. Let it finish. If you see here, one POM file given by default, one properties file, and coming to folders, the package name whichever you said com.rb.hello, it created a package and it given one static and one templates folder. Okay, so by default this structure generated and one main method class also it will provide here. So if you open this class, the default class generated, a class generated with one annotation at the rate Spring Boot application and one main method with the Spring application dot run. Okay, so default a structure is generated here, so it is building. Okay, now if you go to POM file, first visit POM file and see which dependency is added here. As you chose the M3 dependency, right? The dependency added here as a Spring Boot starter parent. So this is the parent version that you are picking up. whichever you choose here, right? This is the parent version, and all other dependencies you are adding, these dependencies will follow the same version. Whichever dependencies, web dependency, Kafka dependency, whatever you add. So that particular version, compatible versions only it will add here. Example for Spring Boot 3.2.0 is Spring Web dependency. If it is 5x or 4x dependency, that 4x or 5x dependency only will add. So here I use 3.2 parent version. For this 3.2 parent version, Spring Web dependency added here. Internally, it might have downloaded a lot of libraries. If you open Maven, Spring Boot Starter Web Boost, Spring Boot Starter, Spring Boot Data Binding, lot of libraries. Embedded Tomcat library, Tomcat 10 it is using embedded Tomcat. Spring Web 6.1 library is imported. Spring 6 version it is using. So far we used Spring 3x in our Spring framework. So it is using Spring Web 6, Spring Beans 6, Spring MVC 6, AOP also 6, context expression. Spring 6 version it is using. So all the supported dependencies it will download, all the required dependencies. You need not to bother about all these dependencies, what it is downloading, how to put that versions here. So this parent version will take care of all the child dependencies. Whichever child you add, for that child as a starters they given them. Okay, if you see here they are naming them as a starter. This starter itself including so many libraries, right? As a starters they given dependency. Just if you add this starter will pull all the required jar files. As a starter projects given all the dependencies to us, and this starter project also which version will pick up, this parent version. This parent version starters only it will download. As part of this starters, it will download all the child dependencies, whichever version is compatible. Okay, so just I added web dependency. Yeah, usually continuously this is updating, right? Let's say today it is 3.2.0, which is standard version. Know about this version. Is it having any problems? Just Google it and take others' opinion, which is standard version. Is it working fine or not? Many must started using this version, right? Check it. If this version is doesn't have, always new versions will have vulnerabilities. That vulnerabilities assessment they do, but during usage, right, they might find some more problems also. People might report it may have vulnerabilities, so they will sort it out and they will release it in a new version, right? So when there is a standard version, right, pick up that standard version until they become stabilized, all snapshot versions. Okay, so usually people will continuously pick up the latest versions only, whichever is standard version. Pick the standard version, and you can check the compatibility with your JDK. So first, JDK compatibility we need to see. Usually projects before you start, right? They recommend maybe go with 11 version or 17 version or 21 version. So based on this version, you see which is suitable for you. If it is supporting 2.7, you can pick it up. 2.7 may have very less features. If you go to 3.1.4, it may have some more features added on top of it. So always latest versions will have new features. And whatever features they wanted to discard or from third parties, also we used to use many libraries, right? That third parties also they might implemented alternatives here in the newer versions. So that alternatives you can find them here. So always choose the latest and pick your required Java version. Right? People are started using Java 11 or Java 17, so you can choose the required version and you can download it. No, Lombok we have not added during our download. We did not add it. Now I added, right? We added only WebJam, not Lombok. Yeah. So this is the project, right? We downloaded. We don't have Lombok dependency. Right? Yes, tell me. No, no, no. Yeah. You need to mention version, but I don't know the compatibility. Mention the version here if you want to override. Let's say you want to use Spring Boot, web version is different and starter version is different. Try to mention that version here at least and see whether that version is available or not, it is compatible or not. I added something 2.0, it is not saying anything. Yeah, now it is giving error. Missing artifactory, no version available. So mostly, right, we don't put any child versions here, a different version. So all the compatible versions only they must shorted out and release it, right? So use that. Still, if you want to downgrade or upgrade to new versions, mention your version here and see whether it is going to compatible to it or not. So yeah, this is our project. Yeah, yeah. That is a different concept. Profiling. We do profiling inside POM itself. POM. No, see, actually, that profiling concept will enable you to touch your POM file also, but I don't recommend that. Okay, just to let you know the environment, it will give that feature. But your question is complete dependencies itself. I wanted to change. Let's say for development, I want to use one version, and for production, if you want to use one different version. I don't know the scenario, but uh, maybe you are saying for development I will use H2 database. For production I will use MySQL database, something like that. Hmm. Okay. Okay. We will see that. Got you. Got you. Yeah. So till now I was explaining about the properties which we configured across the application for the environments. Because while connecting our application to dev database dev configurations we will have for SIT configurations, UAT configuration, prod, COB, different set of properties we maintain. That profile setup we can do in many ways. We can do that we will see. You are saying profile setup for POM itself, right? We will see that if there is a possibility. Even I haven't tried that. We'll see. Okay, profiling for POM itself. Let me build it. Why it is giving error? Clean install. So it is saying compile file Java C70 unbounded. Okay. have Java 17 also. Let me add that to class path. JDK 1.7. Sorry, 17. Basically, compiler, right? It is saying, uh, if you see, compiling one source file with Java C debug release 1.7 to target class default compiler on project hello world fatal error compiling invalid flag. So basically, it's a compiler problem. In our project, right? Project preferences, the compiler is 8th version. So it is not correctly configured with 17 version. So the compiler issue it is getting. So set up your compiler properly here. The JRE and the compiler also, right? Here actually, unbounded version it was showed first, right? Java 17 is not there. You added Java 17 in your form file, but that is not there inside. So then I went to my alternate JRUs and added Java 17. Now Java 17 is available for the application. In dependencies, I said I need Java 17, but in configuration, Java 17 is not there. Okay. So the compatible Java version added there, it sorted out. Now let's see. It given one form file with your dependencies, right? With this parent version and web dependency added here. By default, this starter web will come up with the Tomcat also, embedded Tomcat. So if I run my application, right? How to run? Just you need to go to this main method and you should start it. As soon as you start this, as soon as you start this, earlier we used to use application context, something like this. Application context is equal to class path XML application context. So here we used to load our XML file. Here we used to configure our XML file. So it used to load all the beans. So in that XML file we used to have all the beans. Beans configured in XML file. Or beans else component scan. Right? Firstly we started with the beans. Later using component scan also we understand how container can able to create objects. Now you need, if you are not talking, please go on mute. Okay. If anyone, yeah. So as soon as you create beans, you used to configure it in XML file, or else using component scan, we used to scan them, right? And we used to load it into this class path XML application context. If it is MVC, it used to load it into web application context to make available your beans to dispatcher servlet. Now you are not doing that. No dispatcher servlet, no application context, no XML file. But then how it will, behave like the same how we did before using Spring Framework. All alternatives given here for all. First thing, if you create any beans, you don't have any way to configure it in XML here. You need not use any XMLs. Just you need to use components or component scanning only. If you want to create any other beans here for your application, let's create them. Mention your component annotations, stereotype annotations. Let's say I want to write one student bean. I need a student controller or student. Just mention controller. And if you want to see how it is creating object, you can see system.out.println. Earlier, at least we used to configure this package name into component scan. Now you never do that. Student controller, student business. Just example beans I'm creating. No code in it, okay? Student DAO at the rate repository at the rate service controller. I have my beans here. So at least that for that beans I need to configure component scan in XML file. I need XML file here. Don't worry, you know you need not to put that. So who do this component scan? This at the rate Spring Boot application will take care of it. When you configure at the rate Spring Boot application, right? It by default enabled with at the rate component scan annotation. By default enabled with at the rate component scan annotation. By default component scan also enabled with it. So what it will do, Spring Boot application, what it will do, this Spring Boot application package is Hello World, right? It is there in Hello World. Within this Hello World, if you have any child packages, or within this package if you have any classes with the stereotypes, automatically that all classes it will load it into your IOC. Automatically it will load it into your web application context. Just it will scan your packages and it will load. Where do you configure that? You need not to configure. Where actually you have this Spring Boot application classes, right? Within that package or within the child package of that package, if you write any classes, automatically it will scan. But if you miss this package, if you go out of this package and if you write the classes, it won't scan that within that package only, either same package or child packages. Let's say if I create one more child package here, dot beans, you can have all these classes in this child package also, within the package or under the child package. Okay, this one, REST controller for REST API. Spring Boot is for everything. Spring Boot is for everything. You can create standalone applications also. I mean, I don't want to use that word. You can use this for your simple web applications also. You can use controllers also, and you can use for REST also. For both, it will support. Okay. Now, as soon as I start this, right, at the rate Spring Boot application will scan automatically component scan applied and reads all classes within package or child packages. Default component scan will do that. Okay, so how it is loading it into IOC container? Just you returned a class with Spring Boot application, actually loading here using Spring application dot run, right? So there is a standalone class Spring application with the dot run method. As soon as you supply this here, as soon as you supply this class here, it is behaving like loading your XML file, class path XML application context, how you are loading XML file. Here instead of XML file, you are loading your class here, this class. Along with this class, if you want to pass some more parameters via runtime arguments, you can pass. Right? Earlier we used to give only XML input, right? Now here you can give input of your Spring Boot application here. Spring Boot application And the runtime arguments also. We'll talk about it. What all runtime arguments we can pass. Via this runtime, usually you know runtime arguments, you can pass anything. So via this runtime arguments, we can set up Spring Boot properties. Spring Boot properties, default properties, you can override via this runtime arguments. So that's why they are taking these two inputs, right? While loading it into application context, they are taking hello world application dot class. This is like your XML file. Just imagine this hello world application class you are passing here. This is like your XML file. How I can say this is XML file? Usually, whatever you do in your XML file, right? We configure component column annotation driven, and we configure component column component scan. Which annotation it is? Context, right? Context. Context tag component scan base package we pass. The package name we used to give here form.rbu.hello world. The similar thing, right? Annotation driven. By default, Spring Boot application is Spring Boot itself annotation driven. So you need not to tell explicitly because all annotations only we are using. And component scan. This one also you need not to tell explicitly. So Spring Boot application itself, at the rate Spring Boot application itself is an alternative for you to do the component scan and to drive your application as an annotation driven. So as soon as you load the Spring Boot application here into application Spring application dot run, it will take your input and it will load your classes into your application context IOC container. Then it will start your application. Along with that, as I added Spring WebJar file, it will start dispatcher servlet also. Dispatcher servlet with web.xml we have is a predefined configuration. It's a predefined configuration. This one also will be loaded. Your dispatcher servlet also will start along with Tomcat. By default, Tomcat will come up with this jar file. I mean this dependency. Along with the starter, you will be getting Tomcat. The Tomcat also it will start in default port number 8080. Let's run this application. Java 61 52. Okay. Build not performed anywhere. Right. Just do it. Hello? Hello? No, no, no. I got a call. Just a minute. Yeah. Just a minute. So build is success. Now again run your application. Generator, please check your installation. spoiled by more recent version. 17 I picked up. 17 only we have. JDK 17 only we used. Compiler also 17 only we have. Install JRE. Let me completely remove target and recompile. So if you see while building itself, test class is executing. It is creating your objects. So build is success. It is not running. Madam update. Okay. So your application started and with one error it shut down. So during startup of your application, you can see business object created, controller object, DAO object, business controller DAO. Three objects created and it went to down saying error port number 8080 is already used. Tomcat is starting internally and it is saying on default port that is already used, you can't use it again. Okay, anyway, no requirement with Tomcat for now. Just the basic thing, you need to create all your bean classes within your packages, and that packages should fall under the main root package, whichever you picked right in your artifact. In that root package, if you can create all your child packages, they all automatically will be scanned. If you miss that package naming convention, let's say if I take it out of this package, if I create one more package, com dot rbu dot uh, instead of hello world, if I have something a package DAO, and if I shift my student DAO into this package, so this is not falling under this root. So the root package name is here com.rbu.hello world. This is there in a different package com.rbu.do is a different one, right? It is not the child or within this package wherever you have Spring Boot application, right? This Spring Boot application is part of com.rbu hello world, but your DAO class is part of com.rbu.dao, so this class will not pick up. See how many objects now it will create. Yeah, if I see here, business object created, controller object created. So the default component scan is unable to find whatever XYZ new package you created. So in such case, yeah, anything earlier it is created, now it is not created. We should see the reason for it. Okay. So earlier when it is under the hello world package, or when it is under the hello world dot child package, it's okay, it is picking up. But when it is outside this hello world package, you should mention that component scan here. You need to mention the package which all other packages you want to scan, base packages. You can include the package naming conventions here. Com dot rbu dot, if you want to scan DAO, mention that here. Now ski. Component scanning, and by default it will enable configurations. The complete application is depending on this annotation only. Okay. So mainly for component scan, and defaultly enables configurations. And one more thing itself is a configuration. It will enable default configurations. There are many defaults will execute. We will talk about it. Spring Boot is having many defaults. So all the defaults it will enable. So if you want to disable them, you need to configure that disable configuration here. Okay. And by default, Spring Boot application itself is a configuration class. Okay. So we can do configurations also as part of Spring Boot application. Okay. So explicitly when I give package com.dao, only DAO objects creating, and give your hello world also. Hello world dot beans. You can mention all the packages. Now DAO object you can see business controller, all three objects created. Explicit scanning we are performing here. Okay. When you have when you don't follow this hierarchy, right, you can do this. If you follow it, not required. Usually main application, right, if it sit under hello world, all your child classes, if it inside the hello world package itself, right, you need not to do this configuration. Okay. Or else if you want to scan all, just put parent package dot start. It will scan every, it will go each and every package of actual main root inside com itself. Under com itself, if you want to mention it, com dot star. It will go and scan all the classes. Okay. Yeah. Excuse me. Any doubt so far? Yeah. So this is a simple project we can set up. Tomorrow we will see with embedded servers, what all embedded servers we have, you know, how to use the Tomcat, how we can write REST controllers here, okay, and how to do configurations, dependency injections. We'll go step by step. Lot of content we have to discuss. Okay, are we clear?